Leyla, welcome to the Waterkant.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, we're super excited to have you here. We're huge fans of the Unschool and of your work with the disruptive design. So we're really excited to have you and to hear what you've got to say. I'm here. We'll come back with some questions, or I'll come back with some questions afterwards. But if you're ready, why don't you just take it away?
Oh, thank you so much. Well, I'm very happy to be with you here through the powers of the internet. So, as was introduced, I'm Leyla Acaroglu. I'm a designer and a sociologist and a social entrepreneur, and I'm very passionate about I somehow got muted. That works better for all of us. That's one of my main goals in life. And so what I wanted to share with you today is some of the work that I've done as a creative practitioner in this space, but also some of the tools that I use to help kind of agitate and activate change. So one of the things I've done is I started a design agency called Disrupt Design, and we use design as a catalyst for change. And this kind of idea of design as a critical tool for change has been something that I've really tried to disseminate far and wide, because I believe that the world is entirely designed by humans, as in the human world, the constructed world. And we basically build it to make our lives better. And we use resources that come from nature. And unfortunately, in that process, we kind of pump out pollutants and waste and things that don't support the natural system. And so it's a little bit against our better judgment to not be making sure that the things that we produce, goods and services for the economy, don't have negative impacts on the systems, i.e. nature, that we need in order to continue to perpetuate the production of goods and services, right? So this is kind of one of the key things that I've been working to try and, infiltrate people's brains with. So I design lots of different creative tools that help do that. I'm really into gamification and creating fun-based experiences. And most of my work focuses on the idea that through systems change, through sustainability science, and through design, we can create the products, services, businesses, governments, and entire societies that are truly. If we get to that point, then we might even be able to be a regenerative force on the planet, which would be incredible, giving back more than we have taken. So one of the key ways I do that is through this thing called the Unschool, which is an experimental knowledge lab. I founded it 6 years ago now. And one of the reasons was because I had gone through my academic career up to a PhD, and I felt like I wasn't really getting the tools, the practical tools on how to make change. And so I wanted to help disseminate that. And so we run programs for adults all over the world, now a lot of online, obviously. I had set up a farm in Portugal to run programs, but right now that's all stopped because, you know, we're all stuck in our homes right now. But I'm pretty adaptive. So we're doing lots of online programs. We have a whole online learning system. It's really fun. You can check out we have lots of different classes, but that's not the point of my conversation. I've learned so much from the community of people who have come to the Unschool from all over the world. And one of the key things that I've learned is that passion is contagious. So when you're happy and excited about something, even if you don't know how to solve the problem, then it can be a contagious force. And that's something that we really need more of in the world. You know, we know that we're riddled with problems here, whether it be the current COVID crisis or climate change or ocean plastic waste or the sixth great extinction or any of the air pollution, any of the environmental and social issues, racism. These are issues that affect all of us because they create a kind of systemic issue in society. And for me, if I could get more people to love problems, to learn to love these problems so that they're motivated to help solve them, then we would have, I think, a much better future by design. And a lot of these complex problems are overwhelming. And I get that. I get that people would much rather avoid dealing with some of these issues than confront the reality of them. And so that's really one of the reasons I created the Unschool, and a lot of the tools that we do, like systems thinking and some other things I'll share with you, that really help take that complex, overwhelming, holy shit moment into a practical, actionable set of tools and resources that enable anyone, anywhere in the world to make positive change. Because one of the first things we all need to do is to shift the way we see problems. I think culturally, we're all told that problems are something to avoid. And that means that we often don't really understand them. We make very quick assessments about what it is that will solve a problem. And in systems thinking, we call this the iceberg model, where we say, like, it's only the tip of the iceberg that's obvious, and that the majority of the impacts are actually deep underneath the waterline. And so unless we change the way we see the world and the problems in it, then we're going to keep using the same thinking that caused the problems to try and solve them, which doesn't really get us very far. So I'm interested in completely redesigning that. I have a bunch of heroes. One of them is Buckminster Fuller, and another one is Victor Papanik, who was one of the pioneers of using design as a tool for social change. And I truly believe that it can be a revolutionary and radical force. And that's something that I embody in the work that I do. In 2016, I was named Champion of the Earth by the United Nations, which was quite surprising to me. That's a thing. But as a result, I had a great collaboration with the UNEP to develop a tool that would help everyday people consider the lifestyle choices that they could make to bring about a more sustainable world. And that we created this thing called the Anatomy of Action. We all hopefully have at least one of them. It's your hand. And we can look at the different lifestyle choices that we make, the food we eat, the stuff we buy, the way we move around, back to when we're allowed to move around again, how we spend our money, and the fun things that we do. And across all of these different categories, there are actions that you can take. And in this case, I looked at like all the peer-reviewed scientific data on what actions, if many people took them, would actually bring about significant change. And so certainly protein swapping from higher impact to lower impact proteins in your diet is a really revolutionary thing. If we have more people doing that, we would really see a huge dent in climate change. And the same can apply with the way in which you deal with your stuff. You know, if we can increase repair, if people can ditch disposables, these are all actions. So you can find this online if it's something that's tickling your interest, anatomyofaction.org. It's all available for free. Actually, that's one other thing I'm really passionate about, is getting content out into the world for free. And so we always produce at least 20% of our content freely, open source and accessible. So if you jump online afterwards, you can find a bunch of stuff around that. So I'm really interested in helping people think differently about the problems. And I was lucky enough to create another toolkit a few years ago for the Finnish education system, so not too far from you guys. And basically, this is called the Circular Classroom, and it's an educational toolkit for high school students that looks at the key knowledge areas that I think are critical in order for us to solve complex problems. So like creativity, systems thinking, and also like life cycle thinking. These are all tools that we teach at the Unschool. So we reconfigured it for a high school audience. There's all these really fun videos and activities, and I co-created it actually with students and teachers. And it's a really great tool. Again, it's completely free. It's beautifully designed by my team, and that's all available up online. So why do I do all of this? Because one thing that I think is really important for us to all acknowledge is that humans have created a linear system. Our entire economy is based on extraction and exploitation. And this idea of taking things out of nature, processing them into usable goods, and then chucking them out when you no longer need them, or burning them, or in some cases recycling, but often not that much. It's extremely wasteful, but it's not just wasteful, it's also damaging the systems that sustain us. So we have a crap ton of problems that come as a result of this linear economy, which is a very new kind of construct that humans have created. And it is very much driven by our GDP-based economy, which I'll get to in a minute. But if you look at nature, the thing that created all of us, that we are a part of, that every single second of every single moment of our lives, that we rely on because we inhale oxygen, a byproduct of photosynthesis done by trees, and actually a large percentage of microorganisms in the ocean. So basically, this relationship is a critical interdependent relationship. And if we look at nature, what we uncover is that nature only designs regenerative systems. There is nothing in nature that is pointless. Everything has some sort of role to play. So we can use this to help figure out how we can solve complex problems, but also imagine how incredible it would be if we figured out how to design goods and services like cell phones or our clothes or move around cities in ways that positively gave back to the systems that we took from it. So to help this, I created something called the disruptive design method. It helps people learn to love problems by mining the problem first, looking at the systems and the relationships by landscaping them, and then of course building solutions. And it's based on a whole bunch of different knowledge areas. These are all things that you can learn online. But the most important thing is that it challenges people to take this like from a one-dimensional perspective of a problem to a three-dimensional, and to constantly kind of like cycle through it and be like, so what if we changed the way we interacted with the natural systems around us? Or what if we found ways of reducing things without pollution or air pollution? You know, there's so many different challenges that we have in front of us. One of the big issues that we have is inaction, people not taking action to figuring out how they can contribute to a better world. On that note, I also recently collaborated with Oxfam. We have this great toolkit that's coming out soon that's free as well, that helps people design campaigns to help activate change using the disruptive design method. And as I said, there's a bunch of stuff online. Because one of the things that scientists have started to identify is that we are now living in this epoch, this geological epoch called the Anthropocene. Anthro meaning humans, like anthropologists, and scene is like, I don't know what geologists just define, you know, the time, the geographical time. Like we currently, well, previously, were in what's called the Holocene, which is 10,000 years of really stable climate. And that's how we were able to flourish as a species, by setting up cultures and communities and farming. But the Anthropocene basically argues that humans has impacted every single centimeter of this planet, that we've become a dominant force and altered all of the systems around us. And so for me, if we look at that and we see how, you know, we've extracted more resources than the Earth can replenish, and now we live in this thing called Earth overshoot, where around about July every year, we use up all of that year's resources through the extraction and processing of goods. And we would need like 1.5 planets to really sustain everybody and the lifestyles that we currently live. And so when we look at this, we realize that this is a hugely impactful thing, but it's a lot of opportunity in that. We have altered every single system around us, but we also rely on those systems. So we should be incentivized to figure out how to rectify these environmental injustices that we've done through no fault of our own, perhaps through just our ambition as a species to be so smart and capable and have sexy iPhones. But ultimately, we're smart enough now to see the impact of our actions. And even so, with the COVID crisis, there's a lot of scientific correlation between the climate change, with animals moving further north, with air pollution and having an increased rate of deaths in the regions where air pollution's been really high. So there's a lot of relationships between this extreme chaos that we're going through right now and our destruction of the systems around us. The thing about change, though, is that people often avoid it. What this time has showed me is that people can change really rapidly, but they also prefer everything to be the same as normal. It's called the status quo anxiety. Everyone wants everything to be normal. Most of our conscious decisions are very small when it comes to decision making. In fact, most of us are actually prejudging and using stereotypes and all these different brain hacks to figure out how to navigate the world. And we have all these desires that are often very subconscious. And so when you look at that and you see how easy it is to kind of gloss over the problems and make people feel very scared of this big thing like climate change, rather than motivated to take action, then what we do is we devalue the things that should be the most important to us. Because we do live on one planet. It's the only known planet in the universe that sustains life. I would love the day when we discover another, but it's probably very unlikely. So when we look at the magical wonderment of the fact that we live on the only life-sustaining planet on the universe, then we have a lot of opportunity to figure out how to revalue the services that have evolved over millions of years on this planet, such as photosynthesis, or the fact that, you know, we eat vegetables that give us nutrients for our bodies to sustain ourselves. So when we look at that, we can start to revalue the things around us. And I think this is one of the critical problems, is that we've kind of gotten off track on how we value things. We don't value things for what they're worth. So for example, humans are very easily, sidetracked by things like status and novelty. And these things make it very easy for us to completely ignore the reality that in order to create fashion, for example, we have to do a lot of really damaging things to the planet. And in order for somebody to have some novel product, it's often that something else had to be lost from the system. We don't understand these relationships, and that often means that we push the responsibility for dealing with the problems to some other part of the system. Whereas what I see is that in the circular economy and this whole kind of revamping of how we create businesses and get goods and services from the factories to people, and how that then gets dealt with. It's about revaluing materials and the relationship that we have with the material sources, which are natural environments. And so I see this like as a huge opportunity for massive cultural shifts. Apparently, humans are actually quite capable of doing this, as we've just discovered, perhaps a little painfully, but it is still possible. So I said I have a few heroes, and one is Buckminster Fuller. And I think it's so important to remember that when you want to make change in the world, if you don't fight the existing systems, you design something that makes the old obsolete. And when we look at the linear economy, the big issue here is that we've designed this system. This system is entirely redesignable, but it is inherently based on the extraction of materials, but the production of waste. And the thing about waste is that with our current economic system, with GDP, we actually have an incentive, the system has an incentive to produce waste. That's called externalities. And often externalities, whether it be air pollution or plastic waste in the ocean, they don't affect the people who benefited from their creation. And so therefore, there isn't really an incentive for a producer of disposable plastic packaging, for example, to ensure that it's recaptured and reused effectively, because the entire economic structure is based on continual growth. So I know I'm getting a little nerdy about this here. But it's super important to understand that the GDP-based system we live in was designed 70 years ago. And the guy who created it, Simon Kuznets, he himself said that it was a terrible tool to understand and measure the success of nations because it doesn't incorporate welfare. In fact, what's not included in GDP is an oil spill. In fact, that makes GDP go up, caring for children. So our economic system normalizes the idea of waste, of only physical materials, but also of certain human values. So this is the bigger problem, though. The problem is that we've gone and then created a systems solution called recycling, which makes us all feel good. But unfortunately, this has actually reinforced the problem. Recycling validates waste. We see a correlation between communities that have increased recycling and the rapid increase of disposable products. And even now, with this big transition to the circular economy, we've seen a reduction in the circularization of the economy because these things work in parallel, right? Like people become more confident that things are going well, and so then they change their behavior. So we need to understand the full system in order to make better choices. One tool is life cycle thinking, which I don't have enough time to go into the details on, but you can go online and learn about this from any of my other stuff. Because one of the things I think is really important is to understand the circular economy, this idea of transitioning from a linear economy to one that is designed to be sustainable and regenerative is underway. It just needs more people like you to help make it happen. Whatever job you do, whatever industry you're in, there is the opportunity to change the way you do business, to understand that we live in a system that is a big interconnected natural system that requires us to reconfigure our waste streams from the beginning so that, we don't end up with all of these disastrous outcomes. So there's a lot of different ways you can change the systems around you. You can understand systems thinking, and you can apply a kind of systems mindset. But I think what's most important is to figure out how to make sure that any solutions you put in place today don't become tomorrow's problems, because unintended consequences are what we're dealing with right now. The COVID crisis, it's an unintended consequence. And the more we can understand this kind of holistic thinking, whether it be in government decision-making or whether it be in how you run your family or your household, understanding that for every action there's a cost and there's a reaction, we can figure out how to design better systems and find ways of making sure that the products and services, the lifestyles, the communities that we all are a part of get better each year. I have lots of tools, like I said, online, and I hope that we can all work together to redefine the way we value things. I've written a bunch of books you can grab, and if you are really keen, you can get some discounts to our classes that the team set up for you. But I want to leave you with this idea that the future is designed by our actions today. So everything that we live in, somebody else or a series of other actions were creating that reality. And so therefore we can design a future that works better than today. And I hope you guys are inspired to do that a little bit too. So thanks.
Wow. Leyla, that's great. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. I was exactly on time as well.
Yeah, really, I really appreciate that. And but you also managed to get about an hour of content into
Yes,
20
and I
minutes.
must recommend that you can, on all video platforms, you can watch videos at half speed. So if I spoke too fast for you, you can rewatch me at half speed.
Yeah, okay, super. That's good to know. It's a good tip. I have like a lot of cards and questions here, and hard to know where to start. But I think I want to jump first onto the GDP one, because I know you go into a little bit more depth in your TEDx talk at Lisbon University, which I recommend to everyone. They should watch this. It's a super TEDx talk. It goes a little deeper into some areas that you haven't gone into today with us here. And also there's something super nice by Mariana Mazzucato on price versus value on the Long Now talks, which is like a good 1.5 hours of kind of economics about like what value really means. And this is a super nice thing to watch. But like, so if GDP is no good, and I think we can agree it doesn't work, what kind of measures can we use to sort of measure?
Thankfully, there's a lot of smart people who have already been thinking about this. So there are actually a number of alternative models on the table, presented from as high up as the UN through to different industries. So there's even New Zealand, which don't we all want to live in New Zealand these days, thanks to their fantastic Prime Minister. But they have incorporated a wellness index into their economic modeling. And we are seeing lots of cities, even in the US, at the city level, and at some even at the country level, which is Bhutan, have different models that measure different indicators, not just consumption of goods and services, which is what GDP measures. So they look at wealth and they look at internalizing externalities. There is, of course, an argument around ecosystem service values, but for me personally, when I start to look into that, it gets so murky trying to put an economic value on a tree. I find that really hard to comprehend how we would do that without all of our human prejudgment, because we don't truly understand the value of a tree in its services. Of course, we have great science these days, but it's really difficult for us to truly understand like all of the services that it's providing, the habitat for the squirrel, the water filtration for the local waterway, the neural network for the combination relationship with mycelium, which is the mushrooms, because basically mushrooms and mycelium, they're like the brain of a forest, and they exchange resources with trees, so that, because anyway, they can't photosynthesize, so the tree photosynthesizes for the mycelium, and they take their anyway, whatever. I'm just gonna go nerdy on mushrooms.
No, I love it. don't stop. But there's something to pick up on there that's super interesting. It's about language, because I feel like when you talk about like photosynthesis as a service, or what the trees are doing as a service, I mean, how important is language in our appreciation and valuing of these natural systems?
Yeah, I mean, look, obviously, as a native English speaker, I think about all of the funny words we have in the language set that mean the same thing. They sound the same, but they mean completely different things, right? And so it's very easy for us to misinterpret something, to value something less or more. And also with the human mind, we have a problem with scarcity and abundance. So when we are faced with scarcity, we do weird things like hoard, like toilet paper. And when we have abundance, we do this other weird thing called wasting. And so it's not just language, it's that the imposition that we put through our combination of language and culture and mental models on something in a contextual setting. So like toilet paper suddenly is valued completely differently than it was 6 months ago, you know? And even though I don't think people are technically, pooping more, they're pooping more at home, but so they need more of this product that they otherwise would get for free in other locations. But at the same time, like the funny thing is that the value of this product, this commodity, changes because of this concept of scarcity. And I think that that's also really fascinating when it comes to preserving or protecting or conserving or whatever word you want to use, the natural systems, because when we think there's an abundant supply of something, as a general default, we're likely to waste it. If we think we're running out of something, as a general default, we're likely to conserve it. So, I feel like it's language, it's also mindset, and it's also cultural conditions. Like, we know that COVID as a zootopic, it's a great word, zootopic, disease jumped from humans because of the live animal trade. I mean, you know, we understand that cultural practice, appropriate in some cultures and not in others, is a danger to all of us. And so now we have to have a deep conversation about that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, totally. Yeah. This idea about the life cycle of an individual product and doing like a full life cycle analysis is also something that's really interesting and just kind of like popped up. I was thinking about this earlier, like, can you be objective in a life cycle analysis? So, or is there, where I know that there was a analysis of their packaging, and actually the plastic package was better for the environment than the glass package when they looked at all of the factors.
Well, glass is heavy, so it does tend to as a general rule in LCA, weight tends to equal impact. But of course, like it depends as well. Like LCA, like any tool, can be as good as the people doing it and the data that they have access to. But it is true; it's an uncomfortable reality that sometimes the materials we think are bad are in certain contexts not bad. It's that what we do with them. So, you know, I mean, I've got a pretty famous TED talk on paper versus plastic bags, and the outcome is not to use plastic bags. It's that we have designed disposability into our system. So for me, I use LCA to understand the status quo, but we should no longer be producing disposable products, full stop. Like that's the end. We need to move to a post-disposable world. And yes, it's going to take time, but that should be the goal of every single company. Like, how do we create products that provide value and service and functionality, that make an economic return for businesses, but don't do it in a way that is deflecting the responsibility onto the consumer? Because the thing is that we all pay through our council rates and through cleanup initiatives. We pay for the cost of a company creating a disposable product.
Yeah.
So, you know, I think there's a huge equity issue in that too that is being ignored. So LCA is a really great tool to understand the status quo, but it shouldn't be one used to reinforce it. Yeah, interesting. You also touched, when you, in your talk there, you touched on the kind of carrying capacity of the Earth and how many Earths we're using up, or what, like this idea of like getting to July and then we're done is a pretty scary one. And there's something that caught my eye recently, which is this idea of donut economics, because the city of Amsterdam adopted Kate Raworth's model of economics, where basically you have a minimum level, which is a minimum level of services that have to be provided, which is what is sort of the basic amenities for humans to have a dignified existence. And then the outer level is the carrying capacity of the Earth. And in between is where all kind of activity, human activity and economic activity, needs to take place. But I have this kind of fear that to bring everyone up to a level, the Earth doesn't have the capacity to do that, or does it? I mean, what's your feeling on that? Well, first of all, Kate's work is great. Donut economy is a really fantastic model, and everyone should check it out. And it is really fantastic that Amsterdam is taking the initiative to attempt to put this into place. So I'm eagerly watching that myself.
Yeah.
I think that the thing is that you know, the thing is that the future is designed by actions, but it's also completely undefined. We don't really know. We can model things, and in the past, in the 70s and 80s, there were lots of models that created alarmistic concerns about population growth and carrying capacity, and they created, unfortunately, like the population bomb, it actually incentivized mass agriculture and, you know, GMOs. So I see that as like kind of, you know, the second wave environmental movement also kind of accidentally created a lot of problems. So for me, I prefer to be less dogmatic about these things and more open to the possibility of anything being possible. And so I do truly believe that whilst we are faced with a number of complexities, that with the right kind of mindset and skills and commitment, that we can design ourselves out of this mess. So it's not whether or not the Earth has the carrying capacity, it's whether or not the humans who rely on the Earth figure their shit out and can design their lifestyles and the products and services to not continue to destroy it. So I do think in that case, it's on us, not on whether or not the planet can survive. I mean, the planet will survive without us for sure. Like, you know, we are not a necessary part of this ecosystem.
Yeah.
We are important to ourselves And we can become more important. That's why I mentioned the Anthropocene. Just imagine, with all of these technological skills, capacities, knowledge, science, if we figured out how to be a regenerative force on the planet, not just a extractionary force. Like, that's the big challenge. And maybe it'll happen in my lifetime, maybe not, but that should be a goal that we're all working towards.
Yeah, totally. I hear that. And there's a project called the Good Anthropocene. I can't remember exactly who's running it, but it's also a really nice one where this researcher just gathering together this kind of all these projects that are sort of working towards that harmonious future where we are actually building a sustaining society.
Yeah, it's easy to get caught in the depression cycle, and it's necessary for us to be realistic about the challenges, whether it be on a personal level or on a bigger level. But being stuck in that mindset doesn't help anyone. So we need to find ways of reminding us that throughout all of human history, we've solved complex problems. We've created some, but we've also solved them. So I feel like there's a lot of hope there and optimism. Of course, a healthy dose of reality. It takes a lot of people to solve these problems. And that's the key thing. More people, more action, more people getting positive shit done. That's what we need.
Yeah, and I've got a quick follow-up question and then some questions from the chat, but the follow-up question would be, like, in order to get these people involved, a lot of the decision makers, the stakeholders in society, are not necessarily the ones who are maybe at the grassroots level, who are now, like us, having this conversation about how we need to adopt a systems mindset and think about this kind of analysis. How do we get the stakeholders who have the power engaged and converted to the cause?
Well, power is a fascinating thing to begin with, because once you get it, you fight pretty hard to keep it, right? It's a pretty intoxicating thing. And so that means that there's a lot of space for politicians, especially, to be morally corrupted by the power that they get, if they weren't morally corrupted when they got into politics, because it also takes a particular type of person to get into politics. So, I mean, there's a number of systemic issues in our political frameworks that we use. And I think one of the things that I came to realize a few years ago was that the democracy as we have it today was not designed to be resilient enough against the internet. The internet is really making the concept of democracy a lot more complicated. So I think that there's a number of systemic redesign challenges when it comes to governance, the way we govern society. And so when it comes to what, as you say, converting, although I don't think it's converting, because it's not like anyone can opt out of breathing. So there isn't a human alive on this planet who doesn't have a personal motivation to make sure that, the systems that make oxygen free and readily available is not perpetuated. So once they understand that they're interconnected, that they can't avoid nature, that they need it, it's actually more like, oh, right. It's more like a mic drop moment rather than a conversion. So for me, it's like making things realistic and connecting people to the reality. But overcoming the incentives of other players is a hard thing. So when it comes to incentives of lobbyists or incentives of particular industries, and you have the power problem. So, this is also a moral issue, more like in regards to political decision making. I do think politicians have very hard jobs, though, because they have to keep a lot of people happy. And that's hard. So I'm not 100% sure of like a quick fix to the political will situation, but politicking, right, as we see people kind of using agendas or using topics to kind of have, I just think most politics is like high school. It's pathetic, and people are fighting about shit that doesn't matter. They're just doing it because they want to like one up somebody else. So for me, when I see that, I get very disconnected with political systems, which I think a lot of people feel that way, and they get very disengaged and apathetic because it's so childish. But unfortunately, that reaction of not being engaged in politics kind of perpetuates the problem. So, I don't necessarily have a solution to that one yet. I try very hard to keep myself engaged in politics, even though I'm like, oh my God.
Yeah. I hear you. Yeah. It's like, it's not looking for a solution, more just like, it's just interesting to just like dig into it a little bit.
If anybody has kids or has recently seen kids like fighting over a toy, that's how it feels most of the time.
Yeah.
It's mine, I had it first. No, it's mine, I had it first. Bam! That's what it feels like when you listen to politicians arguing about important topics. So
Yeah, I'm from the UK, but I'm here in Germany, and like some of my friends here, they love talking about what they see in the British Houses of Parliament with the two sides, the way they have this basically school debating chamber running the country. So yeah. We've got some questions from the chat. So about relating to the COVID-19 crisis, does the COVID-19 crisis in the long run put us in a situation of change or an era of fearful conservatism, in your opinion?
I don't know. Plot twist. How's it going to end?
Exactly.
I don't know. It's completely, we are living in the middle of a massive disruption, and who knows? I think it's a bit of a coin toss. Coin toss.
Yes.
I think I just mixed those words up. I think that, well, what we've seen is that the countries that have had the worst death rates and infection rate are managed poorly. That's something that we've seen. So there's definitely something about good governance. I think, though, the fear mongering that is rife around not just COVID-19, but around a number of other big political issues is back to that point that I made about the internet and its like power of influence at the moment. So I don't really know how this is going to pan out. I think that the more we can learn from this experience as it's happening, the more we can see that, okay, so areas that have a higher air pollution have a higher death rate. Okay, let's connect those two pieces. When the more we can learn, the more we can adapt. But the positive thing that I see happening is places like the European Union and Canada, the governments are tying their economic incentive packages to the green recovery movement. So whether it be if you're getting a bailout, then you actually have to ensure that you're making sustainability-based decisions with that money. And so that's a very powerful tool. So I do think we're going to see some significant change as a result of this disruption, but how people's fear, irrational fear, overrides the kind of collaboration to make things better, that I don't know. I mean, the toilet paper hoarding happened again this week in Australia because 20 more people got COVID. Like, I'm like, come on, people, come on. Like, let's be like rationally.
I just remember seeing people coming out of like the local drugstore with like 2 bags of toilet paper under their arms.
And I follow the news in Australia, and they had just lifted the restrictions of the limit of how many packets of toilet paper you can buy, and all the shelves were cleared out again the next day. So they've had to put them back in 24 hours later or something like that. Like, it's just so silly.
Yeah, rationing it. It's listen, something like, to bring it to another level, it's a lovely question, really. What could be the daily practice or method to integrate a systems mindset into your daily life?
Yeah, great question. A really simple tool is to just bang, 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 identify systems. So if you look around the room you're in right now, there are all of these systems at play, okay? So obviously there's the oxygen cycle and there's all of the natural systems, but furthermore, you're probably sitting on a chair that came from a factory that required resources. And so being more like a systems explorer in your day-to-day life, thinking about bus networks and how they get around or how roads are built, and just having a meditative or kind of inquisition practice around the systems that are happening around you is a really powerful tool. When I'm teaching, I often get people to do that for a day. If you pick like a whole day or just a section of the day to like jot down in a journal systems that you've noticed, how they're working, feedback loops, then you start to basically hone this skill set of being able to see the world as a beautiful, big, complex, interconnected, chaotic place for wonderment and exploring. So yeah, just making a time to think about systems in your daily life is a really powerful tool.
Yeah. Maybe I don't want to encourage people to use their phones more, but maybe setting like an hourly reminder just that pops up on the phone to say what systems can you see now?
That had to go into you having that digital intervention in that moment, because there's a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, Leyla, this is really great. Thank you so much for joining us today. I think we could probably go on, and I do have many more questions here that I could get into, but we have a really tight schedule, so we need to finish promptly. Is there any kind of last message, thing you'd like to say to our audience before we go?
Yeah, I mean, just the thing is that there's no wrong or right time to start kind of engaging in these complexities, and starting by asking questions of the people around you, and starting to think differently about the problems. I think if I could leave anything, it's like find a problem to learn to love, and go and be an explorer of it and understand it, and then maybe you'll discover that you have a little bit of agency to help make change in that problem. And if everybody kind of chipped away at the big problems around us, I think we would very quickly see that we have a lot of positive action happening. So yeah.